Thanks for joining Samba TV's State of Viewership webinar. I'm Cole Strain, VP of Measurement Products here at Samba TV. I build omni-screen measurement solutions and try to advance the industry through research and analytics.
And I'm Becca Fine, Associate Director of Marketing Insights and Content at Samba, where I use our first-party viewership data to uncover trends and share insights that help advertisers to better understand their audiences.
Today, we're going to present some of the top viewership trends featured in our latest State of Viewership report and dig into how these insights can help marketers better plan, reach target audiences, and optimize campaign performance. We'll start with a quick overview of Samba TV for those who are new or need a refresher, just as a background at how we uncover these insights. And then we'll look at trends for advertising performance, direct to streaming movies and series, and live sports. Then we'll end on some 2022 predictions. Before we dive in, just a couple of housekeeping items. First off, we encourage your questions. Please submit throughout in the Zoom Q&A feature at any time, but we're going to save the questions for the live Q&A at the end. And secondly, we'll be doing some live polling today. This is very fun. And so when you get a polling question pop up, you'll see a prompt come up in Zoom, a multiple choice question that you can then choose to answer if you'd like to participate. All right, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about Samba and how we collect our data. So we actually gather viewership data through our proprietary automatic content recognition, or ACR technology. This technology sits inside the smart TV devices of over 24 brands and allows us to capture viewership that's based on what's occurring on the TV. Between our ACR as well as our set-top box partnerships, we are able to collect viewership from over 46 million devices globally. And so regardless of whether one of these opted-in households is flipping through channels or on a traditional linear cable or is streaming it on an app or a video on demand, our technology is able to process and understand both the ad exposures as well as the content viewership that is coming through. We then pair this ACR technology with our proprietary identity graph. This helps inform the digital signals and ensures that everything you're seeing is deduplicated at the household level so that you have a solid understanding of reach and frequency fully deduplicated. It's also worth noting that Samba TV is the only independent TV ACR company, meaning we're not owned by any of the brands that you see here. Rather, these are partners of ours. We are their ACR provider, and as we work with them globally. Let's talk about our panel. Our panel is where we pull our insights from. And when it comes to panels, representativeness is everything. Our multi-OEM solution means that our data captures more of the US consumer's perspective. So just as an example of that, we capture a wide range of brands at various price points. This could be a high-end Ultra HD model that goes for many thousands of dollars, a far more economical TV that maybe starts at $100 or $200. Not only do we pull from multiple OEMs, but we finally curate this data into a 3 million household viewership panel, which we then balance on income, age, gender, and ethnicity, all the way down to the DMA level. So this ensures that our insights and measurements are representative across the full country or any geo that we happen to be looking at. We also use 100% ACR data in this panel to ensure that we are fully capturing the transition from a more legacy or linear viewing experience to something more future looking, which is more streaming and video on demand. We also have similar panels for the UK, Germany, and Australia. All right, that's enough on Samba background. Let's get into the data, and we're going to kick this over to Becca.
Great, thank you, Cole. So in our latest State of Viewership report, we analyzed approximately 38 billion hours of linear and streaming across the globe. So to start out, we're going to look at some of the trends that we're seeing from an advertising standpoint. So here we're looking at the total number of ad impressions served on linear versus the number of unique households reached by those ads. So the graph shows those two metrics going back from Q4 2019 up until Q4 2021. And you can see that the reach data, which is that purple line, has been relatively consistent over the past few years, whereas impressions have fluctuated pretty dramatically. We actually saw in Q4 2021 that linear ad impressions increased by 19% year over year, while reach only increased by 6%. So this says to us that advertisers are heavying up on impressions, but instead of reaching net new households, those impressions are driving higher frequencies among the exposed audience. So if you're watching TV, you feel like you're seeing the same ad over and over again, you're not imagining it. The frequency problem is real, and it's only getting worse for many brands out there. Now for our first polling question of the day, what percentage of linear ad impressions do you think reached light TV viewers during Q4? And just as a reminder, those light TV viewers are the bottom 45% of US households based on their linear TV consumption. So the poll is open. Let's get some answers in here, see what people think. They're coming in. All right, so people seem to think that it was C, 15%, but let me tell you, it's actually D, just 3%. So throughout the quarter, 97% of linear impressions were served to just 55% of viewers. Those heavy and medium viewers who maintain a relatively high level of linear consumption. And as we saw, only 3% of impressions were served to light TV viewers, despite those viewers comprising almost half of US households. For a bit of context on these segments, the way Samba's research panel works, we can see how much linear TV a household watches on average. And our data science team found that the top 20% of households watch many, many more hours of linear TV than other households in the panel. And then there were subsequent cutoffs at the next 35% and 45% marks. So looking further at those light TV viewers who only saw 3% of ad impressions, you can see that the total impressions allocated to that group was down 25% from Q4 2020, indicating that linear ads are increasingly unable to reach the broad public. So the big takeaway here is that a linear-only strategy does not fly anymore, with so many people cutting the cord and really slowing down their linear consumption. So to reach those unexposed target audiences, advertisers need to be integrating CTV and digital into their buying strategies. So switching gears a bit here, here we're looking at all of the different categories of ads and how they've shifted year over year and also quarter over quarter. So as you can see, travel saw a pretty substantial uptick in year over year ad impressions at a little over 80% there. So with customers and consumers adjusting to COVID really as a part of their daily life, a lot of people, myself included on this one, are yearning to get back to travel. And advertisers are definitely taking note of that. However, it is worth noting that the number of linear impressions served by travel advertisers in Q4 2021 was 11% below the 2019 baseline, suggesting that the vertical hasn't fully bounced back to pre-pandemic levels. Another category to call out here was career services. That was a standout category in Q4. With advertisers serving a 2-year record high impression volume. We all know about the Great Resignation, and in light of that, hiring managers are doing everything they can to really be competitive, and a big part of that strategy is getting eyes on their TV ads. So looking at the specific brands that serve the highest volume of impressions, may see some familiar faces there. I know I watched a lot of TV this holiday season without really leaving the couch, and definitely saw a lot of these brands pop up. So overall, we saw that retailers and insurance kind of dominated those first few spots, with Walmart at number 1 there and Liberty Mutual at number 2. In terms of shifts from Q3, you can see that Walmart, Target, Macy's, and Kohl's were all new to the leaderboard this quarter, which really goes to show how strong their ad presence was during the Q4 holiday push. And on the right, you can see each of those retailers' year over year impression shifts, and they were all up between 20 to 35%. So digging into that trend a bit, we did see kind of in general that America was a lot more open for business in Q4 2021 than it was in Q4 2020, with foot traffic to stores and shopping centers up 14% from the 2020 holiday season. So we have to assume that advertisers anticipated and saw that trend and really flighted their TV impressions to match. This slide is showing the top advertisers during Q4 in the UK, Germany, and Australia. So there were some similarities between each of these markets, but also some pretty notable differences. So starting with the UK, you can see that lottery was very prominent during Q4. The top advertiser in the UK was People's Postcode Lottery, followed by Gallup Bingo. And then in Germany, we saw that food and CPG brands really shared a lot of ads this quarter, while in Australia, supermarkets and QSR were at the top there. Differences aside, you can see that McDonald's was within the top 10 brands in each market, and Amazon was within the top 5 brands in both the UK and in Germany. All right, over to you, Cole, for a look into movies and series.
All right. I'm very excited to go through this data, mostly because I'm a huge consumer of both movies and series on streaming. So let's get into it. Let's see what we can learn. So we're going to start with OTT apps. Cord cutting is on the rise. This is not a surprise to anyone. And so are the number of OTT services that we all use. It was common for households to watch content about multiple platforms. We did see 60% of streamers tune into more than one service. However, we see this drop off at 3+ devices, so suggesting that there is a limit to the number of services that we are willing to use and subscribe to. It's also fair to assume that there is some amount of sampling occurring here, subscribing for a free trial or just to see a specific piece of content before canceling that and moving back to the app that you are more familiar with that has more of the content you're looking for. This is important to note for marketers. This means that a holistic strategy involves capturing some of these trends. Data-driven tactics are needed to determine which apps the audience is using and to deliver the right message despite the fragmentation. All right, let's talk about movie releases. So what we're looking at here is 90 days of data. So this is viewership in Q4, therefore mostly Q3 releases because we want to look at that full 3-month window. We are seeing Tomorrow War and Suicide Squad at the top of the heap here, but what I actually found most interesting was the longer tail of viewership from some of these titles. Let's take a look at Black Widow. This is most pronounced. 10% of the Black Widow viewers tuned in during month 2, and even larger increase, 20% viewed in month 3. There may have been a little bit of halo effect here resulting from the entertainment news cycle. There was a dispute between Disney and the star Scarlett Johansson that may have fueled some of this. But we're also seeing this pattern occur for Jungle Cruise, another Disney Plus title. Of the 2.2 million households that watched Jungle Cruise in the first month, another 15% watched in the second month. So as we look away from the shows and start to looking at the platform level views, you can actually see some of this marketing strategy for each of the platforms starting to peek through. So Disney Plus, as we've talked about, has a little bit more focus on the long tail growth versus HBO Max. This is narrowed in on a shorter time window, and many of the releases, their same day premieres, are limited to a 31-day window. So the content strategy is also peeking through here. These are important nuances for everyone to be aware of as they're thinking about planning and strategy related to each of these platforms. Let's take a look at movies in Q4. So many streaming platforms have started to move away from the simultaneous theatrical and streaming releases in favor of longer theatrical only runs. We're seeing, though, that Netflix is still a really big winner when it comes to these streaming releases. Q4 saw a number of titles hit less than a month after the box office debut. Red Notice, 7 days post-theatrical release, had 4.8 households, 4.8 million households viewing in the first 4 days, which was about 50% of the viewership. And then The Harder They Fall, which was 12 days post-theatrical release, had 2.1 million households in the first 4, again, very close to that 50% of the first month viewership. I actually really like this slide because it's just so interesting to see the behavior here that we're all going through. We like to watch movies as they premiere. We have the ability to watch them on demand. We can time shift them infinitely into the future, but we choose to watch them the moment they come out. This is just a really nice practice that I hope we continue to take from the legacy theater releases and continue to apply this to streaming as we march into the future. Now, it's really hard to talk about Q4 without talking about the holiday season. So let's take a look at some data from that. The fourth quarter includes not 1, but 2 seasonal programming moments, both Halloween as well as holiday. This brought an influx of seasonal content across streaming, and we want to take a look at who's watching. So households with female viewers actually over-index for all of the films, both Halloween horror as well as the holiday seasonal fare. Halloween films over-index most for households with Black viewers, most notably Amazon Films' Bingo Hell, as well as Blackest Night. On the other hand, households with Black viewers under-index for the majority of holiday seasonal releases. We did see an over-index for those households with Hispanic viewers for the holiday season. I also want to make sure that we just take a brief moment to acknowledge these holiday movie titles because they are amazing. I definitely missed Love Hard this year, but I will swing back to it for 22 holiday season. All right, let's do another polling question. So which of these streaming series had the highest viewership in the first 4 days of its season premiere in Q4? Was it You, Maid, Emily in Paris, or Hawkeye? We'll take just a moment. All right. And Emily in Paris was the top vote. However, the correct answer was You. You had the highest viewership during the Q4 premiere. Let's take a little bit more look at this data and see what else we can find. Due to the sheer number of options for series, streaming series don't actually see the quite same viewership as films do during the first 4 days, but there's still some pretty interesting trends here. As I shared, You had the most front-loaded viewership. The premiere saw about 47% of the month 1 viewership occurred within the first 4 days. We also see that Wheel of Time and Cowboy Bebop had similar patterns, though it is worth noting that both of these series have some built-in fan bases from both the novels and the previous animated series. On the other hand, new Netflix series Maid premiered at 1 million households in its first 4 days. There was some word of mouth and good reviews here. It got an 8.4 out of 10 on IMDb, and this increased the viewership to 4.2 million households in the first 31 days. From the MCU, we also saw a very, once again, long-tail performance from Hawkeye. This pattern also had the majority of viewers coming after the first 4 days. It's possible that the first few days may have been impacted by the holiday launch, but it, of course, worked out very well for Disney Plus in the long run. So the takeaway, we have seen that returning shows and established series tend to come complete with an audience built in, but newer series may take a little bit longer to build buzz and find the appropriate audience. It's just important to be aware of these trends as you're thinking about strategies with each of these platforms. And now, over to Becca with sports.
Great. Yeah, let's take a look at some of the trends that we're seeing on the live sports front. So this graph is showing how ESPN viewership in 2021 compared against 2020. And you can see that viewership in Q4 2021 was pretty steady with 2020. It was a bit higher in December, but a bit lower in November, then very on par in October. So the NFL was in full swing throughout the quarter, and the MLB World Series was in October, but there was no NBA and NHL championship series like there was in Q4 2020. Interestingly, we did see that tune in to NFL football was strong enough to actually shift the overall narrative of linear TV reach. You can see in that quarter over quarter graph on the left, there was a 3% increase in linear reach from Q3. And then on the right, we see that all of the top linear programs of the quarter were related to the NFL. So if you're like me and your Sundays are dominated by a family full of crazy Seahawks fans, maybe this isn't shocking to you, but we still thought it was super interesting that football this quarter was strong enough to prevent a quarterly decline for really the first time in almost 2 years. It is important to note that the spike did mirror pre-pandemic trends, since we do typically see NFL games bringing in kind of a wider range of viewers than what's typical for linear. Like in 2019, for example, Q4 reach was 5% higher than Q3. So all of this goes to show really the hold that NFL has on America, and how a lot of people who have shifted away from linear still do tune in for football. All right, so outside of the NFL, NBA was also in full swing this season. And here we show a demo comparison of the NFL and NBA games that were played on Christmas Day. So just for some context here, there are always NBA games on Christmas, but there are only NFL games sometimes, depending on the day of the week that Christmas is. And since it fell on a Saturday this year, there were in fact NFL games as well. So how did that work out for everyone? Going back to our general takeaway of the NFL essentially ruling America, we did see NFL kind of dominate NBA in terms of viewership. So the highest rated NFL game on Christmas was Packers versus Browns at 13.8 million viewers, while the highest rated NBA game was Lakers versus Nets at 3.9 million. However, it is worth noting that the NBA game on Christmas drove much more diverse viewership than the NFL. You can see that half of the NBA game's viewership was non-white, whereas only 1/3 of the NFL viewership was. And now for our final polling question of the day. During the WNBA finals, which city over-indexed in viewership the most outside of the home teams, Chicago and Phoenix? Was it New York, Atlanta, Seattle, my hometown, or San Francisco? All right, let's see what the results are. People seem to think it was Atlanta, and they're correct in that. The answer was B, Atlanta. Let's take a look. So you can see that Atlanta over-indexed by 109% compared to the US, which was actually higher than Phoenix, which was competing in the finals. So the Phoenix Mercury was the number 5 playoff seed, and they were playing against the number 6 seed, the Chicago Sky, with both teams upsetting the top 2 seeds and in the semifinals. And then ultimately, Chicago defeated Phoenix in 4 games to win their first WNBA championship. So for game 1 in the finals, comparing overall viewership of the top 25 DMAs to the US average, you can see Chicago over-indexed the most there at 150%, followed by Atlanta, as we saw, at 109%, and then came Phoenix at 103%. So the other big sporting event in Q4 was the MLB World Series, which did see a pretty impressive uptick in viewership against 2020. So the Braves and Astros split the first 2 games in the series, and then the Braves went on to win. We saw Game 5 drive the highest viewership at about 11 million tune-ins, which was 57% higher than Game 5 in 2020. Overall, part of the reason viewership was up so much year over year was that the 2021 World Series was back playing in sold-out ballparks for the hometown teams, a lot of energy, a lot of excitement. Whereas the 2020 World Series was played in a neutral ballpark in Arlington, Texas, and it only allowed 25% fan capacity. So probably not the craziest shocker here that people like watching games where there are fans and those fans are excited, as opposed to empty stadiums. Finally, there was also the Formula One finals in Q4, which did gain a lot of popularity across countries, largely because it was such a close race that really came down to the wire. So US viewership was up 110% from 2020's finals, while the UK saw a very dramatic increase of more than 400%, which was impacted by their star racer, Lewis Hamilton. In the US, the finals were at 5 a.m. Pacific time, 8 a.m. Eastern, and probably impacted by that kind of awkward timing, we did see Eastern and Southern states tune in at really the highest rate of US territories. All right, over to you, Cole, to walk through some of our predictions for 2022.
All right, let's talk about what we see in the future, trying to read the tea leaves, but I think these are some pretty solid predictions we've got for the year to come. So starting with OTT, as more households cut the cord, OTT platforms are going to continue to have tough competition. We saw earlier that original content remains one of the best ways to win eyeballs during in the attention environment. This is clearly seen with Netflix dominating the top 5 for both streaming movies as well as series for the quarter. They continue to invest heavily in original content, and it's absolutely proving worthwhile. However, there's also significant growing competition from new players like Disney+. The race will continue as streaming platforms are under even more pressure to add new subscribers as well as retain their existing ones. And as we saw, there is an upper limit on services. We'll watch 2, but we're unlikely to watch 5. So prediction number 1, OTT platform competition will continue to increase.
All right, prediction number 2. As live sports continue to move to hybrid streaming models, linear viewership from sports fans will decline. So linear has always been pretty dependent on news and sports to maintain its viewership. And last quarter, as we saw, the NFL really was the clear saving grace for traditional TV. We did see that uptick. It was for the first time in almost 2 years that linear reach was up slightly because of those NFL fans. However, as live sports continue to move to hybrid streaming models, we think that this is probably the last time we'll see sports kind of jump in and save the day for legacy linear viewership.
Last year, the industry called for a more efficient measurement ecosystem, even some calls for measurement independence, encouraging everyone to break free from legacy thinking as well as legacy metrics that didn't evolve with our viewing behaviors and have largely held back measurement innovation. So we're seeing more marketers move towards advanced measurement, leveraging more options and more based on business outcomes. And this is good for the whole industry. So prediction number 3. We'll see more adoption of multiple currencies for measurement this year.
Prediction number 4, subscription fatigue will drive more innovation in OTT. So many viewers have become tired of subscribing to multiple services. We showed this earlier, only 34% of OTT households watched 3 or more SVOD apps last quarter. And this year, Deloitte expects more than 150 million people to cancel a streaming subscription. However, this is driving innovation trends for OTT monetization. Providers are increasingly turning towards pay-per-view and advertising monetization, really as alternatives to subscription. So we may see more bundling of different subscription packages together to create channels. We've sort of already seen Disney Plus bundle their videos together with ESPN, National Geographic, and other content producers, along with Viacom CBS's bundle of Paramount Plus and Showtime. And we do think that these bundles will likely continue to become more popular in the future.
I'm a big fan of this one, as we're long overdue for an updated upfronts model. The traditional upfront structure is rigid and it's imprecise for brands and limits their ability to be nimble as there are unforeseen shifts. Brands and agencies learned during the craziest days of the pandemic that they need more flexibility built into their TV buys. Samba is even launching an initiative called Flex Fronts to help build a more optimal plan between linear and CTV that's designed to balance both reach and flexibility. And considering that we saw 97% of linear ad dollars are now only reaching 55% of TV viewers, there's absolutely a need for change. Of course, there's a lot of inertia here. A new philosophy won't take root overnight, but we are starting to see the industry shift more towards this model. All right, and before we move off predictions, Becca, I wanted to ask you one. I want to know just what is your top predicted streaming show for 22?
It's a tough one because there's so many great options out there, but I think it's going to be Succession. I can't wait to see what happens next there. What about you, Cole?
Excellent choice, but I'm going to continue to remain strong and a champion for Ted Lasso. It's can't get enough. All right, thank you all for the predictions. Let's move on to a couple of questions in our remaining minutes.
I can go ahead and take the first one. I'm gonna ignore the Q&A taunt of my Seahawks and jump right into this one here. Can you share some examples of how you work with advertisers to use this data for targeting? Yes, so there's tons of ways to leverage this data to create kind of different targeting tactics, different segments, and the way that we would recommend doing this really depends on the goals of the campaign. So a lot of the advertisers that we work with are interested in building incremental reach, so identifying households that didn't see their ads on linear and hitting that group on CTV or digital. And we also do a lot of competitive conquesting, like hitting your audience with an ad maybe during the same time the competitor is airing an ad in the Super Bowl. Or to use the holiday example that Cole talked about, we saw that female viewers were more likely to watch holiday content. So we could work with you to kind of target those viewers during tentpole holiday events. So lots of different ways to get super specific with our targeting, including those examples, and then also geo-targeting, behavioral targeting, and a bunch more granular stuff. Cole, you want to take the next one?
Yeah, and I'm going to try to do 2 questions here at once, but the main question is, how do we define high, medium, and low viewership? It's a good question. I'll also talk a little bit about our data capture. So our measurement panel is 100% powered by ACR, so that allows us to capture regardless of the input source. That could be a set-top box, that could be streaming, that could be over the air. As long as it's enabled in one of our smart TVs, we're able to see this. From our panel, we then apply k-means clustering to help understand high, medium, and low viewership. We actually see a lot of stability in these groupings. So for the most part, we approximate this as the bottom 45% is light, and then the medium and high definitions as well. Quarter to quarter, this might shift, but we usually see it stay consistent within 1 to 2% quarter over quarter.
All right, I think we are at time, so I'll just take this last question very, very quickly. It's a short one. Will you be sharing any data around the Super Bowl or Olympics? Yes, we have a Super Bowl report coming out next week. And then when the Olympics wrap up February 20th, we'll have a report releasing shortly thereafter.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for checking out our webinar today. If you have further questions, you want to learn more about Samba TV solutions, please visit our website, samba.tv. You can also download the Q4 State of Viewership report from the website, and we'll be following up with everyone here for the link. To get more timely TV insights as well as trends, make sure to follow us on social media. Thank you all very much and have a fantastic quarter.